a coward, an idiot, a naive fool, a slave. Those are just some of the words used to describe one of the most misunderstood characters in all of One Piece. King of the Giants Harald, the last leader of Elbaf and the sole responsible for changing a centuries-old culture entirely based on strength to a society where children don't need to worry about the old ways of war and brutality. Before Harald, the Giants were a race feared by all. To the world, the Giants were savages who loved nothing more than just take and destroy, plundering all those who were weaker than them, and since they are the most powerful race in the world, no one was safe from their unmatched strength. Even the world government, as powerful as they are, ruling the world with an iron fist for 800 years, having hundreds of kingdoms and the entire marine force under their command, know that the giant race might alone is a decisive force in any war they partake in. And above all of that, they are the ancient giants, probably the strongest race that was shown to us in all of One Piece. These were an even bigger and stronger race of giants that were the original conquerors of the New World. So strong that Ors, being one of them, was referred to as Ors the Continent Ruler. Harald, the strongest and most important king of Elbaf, the giant whose strength was rivaled only by the strongest pirate we ever saw, Rocks the Shebek, and the character I think is the most misunderstood character in all of One Piece. And in this video I'm gonna try to explain why Harald did what he did and why he in the end chose to sell his body to the literal devil of the One Piece world. Our story begins in the chapter 1152. It's here that we saw for the first time the young King Harald, and in this single page we can already learn everything we need about his younger days. First off, we learn a little about giant history, on how hundreds of years ago, if you asked anyone on that era what the scariest thing on the sea was, the answer always would be the same: the giant warriors pirates. And in the next page, it showed us exactly why. As we see young King Harald and his giant pirates attacking an innocent kingdom for the simple reason of seeing a beautiful princess. And then Harald is smashing his own crewmate in the castle, injuring not only one of his own, but possibly killing hundreds of innocents for the sole reason of getting a laugh, no different from a typical pirate. It's with this introduction that we learn on how the legendary and beloved king of Elbaf in his younger days was not a good person. To use the narrator's own words, King Harald was pure scum. And it's in this same flashback, a chapter later, that we meet the biggest reason why Harald did everything that he did, and why he fought so much to change the entire giant culture, and why he was willing to give everything, not because he was dumb, not because he was a bad king, but because, like his best friend David the Shebek, that chose to risk everything facing Imu and the world government way before he was ready and died because of that, Harald did what he did because of love, and that love was none other than Ida, one of the sweetest and most lovable characters Oda ever wrote. But before delving deeper about Ida and her relation with Harald, let's first talk about the chapter 1153. An important chapter to understand Harald and his journey as a character. It covers everything from his childhood to his adulthood. In just 17 pages, you can understand a lot about Harald. And in this video, I'm gonna dissect some of the pages of the chapter to better exemplify the message that I think Oda was trying to pass. First, we begin on page 3. Here is shown to us a tiny bit of Harald's infancy and growth, telling us on how Harald, because of his ancient lineage, he possessed a colossal body and a monstrous strength, making him probably the strongest giant even at a younger age, and because of that, he grew up arrogant and unruly. The next page starts with a little narration, a circus man announcing an attraction. That attraction being none other than a giant, Ida herself, using horns and making a scary face to entertain the public. And at the end we see an angry Harald outraged to see a giant being used as a roadside attraction. On page 5 we see a proud Harald after saving Ida, saying that she doesn't need to thank him for saving her from the circus. Unfortunately to him, One Piece women are just built different, and she slapped the cockiness out of his face, giving us one of the most funny faces in the manga. In the beginning of the next page, we see Ida telling Harald they need to go back and apologize, making Harald call her crazy. And then the obvious happens. Ida just punches him again. And I just find hilarious the fact that Harald's entire crew just stand there as their king is getting beat up by this lady, and they do absolutely nothing about it, showing us who truly is the strongest gender in the One Piece world. Not long after, Ida starts explaining that the circus people are the ones who saved and helped her. And ending this page, in the beginning of the next, we have the panels that shows the point in time when Harald started to doubt his giant culture. First, we have Ida crying out of frustration and rage to a terrified Harald on how the behavior and thoughts of giants like him that causes all the giant race to get a terrible reputation, saying that his size and strength doesn't mean nothing, because they are nothing more than just a quirk of fate. And we can see on how Ida's words have truly affected him, because after that we get Harald reflecting on her words. The next pages and panels we are shown Harald and Ida sailing together, interacting with people from different cultures and getting close. But two specific panels I want to comment about are these. First, the giants commenting on how Harald has changed, and the other one being giants and normal humans doing the Nika dance. And at the same time, Ida telling him that the destruction of anything in this world is a waste. Kinda peculiar on how Oda put this specific dance and this specific phrase in the exact same panel. Continuing chapter 1153, we have the culmination of Harald's journey, with him coming back to Elbaf, making a speech to his people recognizing Elbaf's sins and announcing to everyone on how he plans to travel overseas, making friends with other nations so Elbaf can become more prosperous, with the page ending with the elders and Ida happy, saying that Elbaf is blessed. On page 11 we have a little more about Harald's journey with Ida and the result of their relationship, that being Loki's older brother Harujin, and at the same time Harald being prohibited to marry Ida by the royal family tradition, with the page ending with Ida saying that is okay because she at least can still continue to see Harald. And to finalize this chapter, we have some more panels showing Harald's life and his journey to make allies for Elbaf, but in the end, unfortunately failing because of the old government restrictions. So it's to no one's surprise how Elbaf, not being a world government affiliated nation, would struggle immensely to make allies with other countries, and even countries not affiliated with the world government, as seen on how damaged the giants' reputations were throughout the seas. But at this point in this video, you must be questioning why Harald wants so much to make allies with other nations. Is not Elbaf the strongest nation in the world? You see, yes, they are the strongest nation, but strength, especially physical strength, don't mean much outside attack and defense. Outside those things, you have to remember, the majority of giants are just normal people trying to live their lives. They still are very vulnerable to things like natural disasters, and that's exactly what happened in chapter 1154. 63 years ago in Elbaf, a bunch of calamities happened in quick succession, putting the people on Elbaf in a state of famine. The situation was so desperate that villages started attacking one another. They even tried to attack Ida and Hajurudin, because the giants blamed Loki for all that misfortune that happened. In this chapter, we could see why Harald was so desperate to make allies. I bet it's not the first time something like this happened, and the giants of Elbaf, having the culture they had, they probably solved this kind of problem by pillaging other countries, so they never developed ways to deal with harsh times like this. But before the giants could harm Ida and Hajurudin, comes Harald to save the day, flattening the giant threatened Ida with a single punch, and bringing with him supplies from other nations to end Elbaf famine, with a speech on how with the help of the small humans they will be able to fill their giant bellies, saying, if these good folk are even in a pinch, it will be our job to return their favor with all our might. Remember, this tiny world is ours to share. This page, page 7, together with this panel from page 12 from the chapter 1154, where Harald shared his dream on having Elbaf welcomed by the rest of the world, solidify, to me at least, how great Harald was as a king. Sure, he had his problems and sometimes made bad decisions, but it's undeniable that he was trying everything in his power to bring a good future for his people. And here we end with Harald's beginning introduction. Now we see a bit of what he did during the long years he was a king. And this time I'm not gonna do what I did before and present you with specific chapters and pages, because Harald's story pretty much take a break in the ending of chapter 1154. The same ending pages we see the greatest pirate Oda has ever showed to us, Rocks the Shebek. From here, the little we see of Harald and Elbaf's story are throughout Shebek's perspective. So from chapter 1155 to chapter 1166, all we see from Harald is his friendship with Rocks, and they were best friends. An unusual friendship that started with the two attacking each other even before a single word was exchanged between them. And in the same chapter, chapter 1155, we see for the first time Rocks trying to recruit Harald, something that he would persistently do for many more years to come. Rocks genuinely liked Harald. Rocks considered Harald so much to the point of kicking a young Kaido for merely suggesting that they should use force to make Harald comply to his plan. And the feeling of brotherhood was not one-sided either. We saw how Rocks' death completely broke Harald, to the point that we can say that what mainly caused Harald's horrible fate was Rocks' demise. After God Valley, Harald lost it. We saw how he broke down in tears and regret. And now, speaking like a normal reader and not a guy trying to make an informative video on YouTube, this page devastated me. I think the last time I got this sad over a One Piece was on the Mary's death, and I personally think this is one of the most sad moments that Oda ever drew. One Piece has always been a story about friendship, found family, the bonds we make throughout our lives, with people we truly connect with, above fights, above treasures, even above the One Piece itself. Those things never really mattered as much as the friends and family the characters make along the journey. So seeing Harald in complete despair here, because the death of his greatest friend, is truly devastating. And to explain better, Harald cries here. Let's talk about what was in fact the worst decision of Harald's life, and that was turning his back on his greatest friend. In chapter 1156, out of nowhere, we get one of the most tragic fights in the manga, Rocks vs Harald. And the reason why they are fighting could not be worse. The world government offered to make Elbaf an affiliated nation, the thing Harald has been pursuing more than anything, and the price for that, Rocks' death. And of course, that would not end well. The two strongest of their generation clashed in Elbaf, destroying everything around them, but neither of them could truly finish the job. Rocks would not kill his best friend, nor would Harald. But after this, they would not meet again until some time. And not just some time, the worst time possible, the only time Rocks truly needed help. With the lives of his wife and son in fate's balance, feeling that luck was not on his side, Rocks pleaded with his best friend one last time, and Harald would deny it, something that would later become his biggest regret. As we would not see Harald again until 7 chapters later, in chapter 1166, page 15 to 16. And this is the moment we return to this panel, the same one we see how Harald truly felt about this entire situation. He wanted to help Rocks, but couldn't. He was already failing miserably in his dream for Elbaf. If he helped Shebek on that moment, that would guarantee not only that Elbaf would never join the other nations, but also make the giants an enemy for the world government for life, throwing away his entire life objective and at the same time probably bringing war to Elbaf. And in this exact moment we see the beginning of Harald's final arc, the one who ultimately doomed him and almost doomed Elbaf in the giant race. And to understand exactly why, let's pay a little attention to Harald's words in this page. All of your scum with size as your only quality are the ones who built the giant history of terror, and because of you, no one believes us. They don't believe that we seek a peaceful seat among the nations of the world, and that's why I couldn't help him. My greatest friend begged me for help and I turned my back on him. I left him there to die. Now I cannot turn back from this path. I refuse to look over the evil of the giants. And I want you to pay attention to this specific line. Now I cannot turn back from this path. Because after this, Harald invades the Marine HQ at the time, in one of the most agonizing scenes in the manga, physically because he breaks his horns, making every man in the moment cry of pain, and metaphorically because we know how the world government operates. The King of the Giants declares to the Marine and the world government that for a chance to atone for the giant sins, he would even become a slave. And for this specific scene, this video was made. I talked and talked for God knows how much minutes just to get to this panel and discuss it now. So why? Why this panel? Because of this page we saw one of the best character arcs and stories ever told in One Piece, full of emotion, meaning and nuance. Since the first chapter he appears and every single one he appears subsequently, Oda make one thing very clear: Harald wanted the best for his people above all else. And every choice he made was because of that. He married Astrid and not Ida, not because he didn't care for the woman he loved, but because even though he was immensely stronger than those who prevented his marriage, he wanted to be a good and respected king. And to do that, he could not simply ignore and go against centuries of tradition out of nowhere. I bet that the people of Elbaf would not like that. The only reason he was absent for the majority of his sons' lives was because he was constantly sailing, trying to find allies and things that could make Elbaf better. As we see, the only reason Elbaf did not starve was because Harald was able to bring help from other nations. And we also see how even though he fought rocks and did not help him later, he only did that because of his people. The man put his life and interests in second place just so he could make the lives of the giants of Elbaf better, and that's why this specific panel is so profound. Not long after he received the news of his best friend's death, something that Harald heavily blames himself for, he sees some of his own people pillaging a kingdom, the same behavior that made the giants so feared in the first place. So was in this point that Harald broke. His entire life was dedicated to a single goal and was failing miserably, so he did the only thing he thought would honor Rock's death, sacrificing himself to the world government, in the hopes of finally making Elbaf a member nation. Like he himself says, "Now I cannot turn back from this path." I know what I said just now looks silly. How Harald become a slave would honor Rock's death. Did not Rock criticize Harald a bunch of times exactly because of that? And you're not wrong in thinking that. But to see Harald's point of view, he could not help his friend when he needed the most because of his dream. So now he was willing to do everything to achieve it, even if that meant becoming a slave, because at least Rock's death would not be in vain. And that's exactly what happened. If you really think about that, Harald achieved exactly what he wanted, even if it was in a strange way. Elbaf became a better nation to live in, and because he delved too deep in the world government shenanigans, he and Loki were able to see how truly rotten the elite of this world is, guaranteeing that the giants would never be emu soldiers. And now to finalize this video, let's talk about the tragic end of the greatest king Elbaf ever had. And that end was caused by no other thing than love. Harald loved his people, his land, Ida, Loki, Hajurdin, and that love was ironically what caused his downfall. When Harald was young, Ida showed him how beautiful and amazing the world truly was, a world that he wanted to share with his people, and most important of all, a world that he wanted to travel together with Ida. That's why he was fighting so fiercely to make Elbaf a world nation and redeem the giant's reputation across the seas. And furthermore, that Rox was his greatest friend. If Harald was to join Rox or helping him in God Valley, that would throw away all his lifelong effort of achieving his true dream, that was being married to Ida and traveling the world with her. He was even planning on abdicate the throne the moment Elbaf joined the world government. After reading these latest One Piece chapters, you can truly see why Shebek and Harald were such good friends, even their deaths happening in the same way, with both men choosing to sacrifice themselves for their families. Rox going to God Valley and facing Imu way before he was ready, and Harald making a pact with Imu with the promise of the world government finally recognizing Elbaf, but of course being just another promise never to be fulfilled. But after the pact is done, there's no coming back. At this point, not only Harald could not disobey Imu anymore, but also at the same time we got even more glimpses of Imu's terrifying powers, going way beyond a simple mind control. Imu can fundamentally change how a person thinks and acts, completely overriding their personality and will, something that not even the strongest Conqueror's Haki users could resist for long. And that's how it ends. Harald, seeing how foolish he was and predicting the impending disaster, called Loki and his warriors to his castle and gave them one single instruction: kill me and tell the truth to the people. One final wish before he loses himself to the mark. And then it started, one of the darkest days in Elbaf history, the day the most beloved and wise king in the nation history started attacking his own people. The giant warriors, Loki, Shanks and Gaban, attacked Harald with all their might, but it was useless. No matter how much damage Harald would take, he would simply quickly heal, and even Gaban explaining how to counter the regeneration of the God Knights by infusing your attacks with the color of the Supreme King Haki, you could eventually knock them out of commission. It still was not looking good for them. Harald was immensely strong and possessed immense Haki. Now, together with his immortality, he appeared unstoppable. The only hope was Loki, that at this point was trying to reach Elbaf legendary fruit, so in the hopes of consuming it, he would be strong enough to stop his father. Something that Loki would be successful. After eating the devil fruit and subduing Harald with his newfound strength, it appears that the Elbaf legendary king was able to finally regain his mind. But, unfortunately, it did not take long to Harald explain Loki that this was but a temporary victory, and sooner, when the mark regenerated, Emu would take control again. Nonetheless, Harald spent this little time he had praising his son, thanking him for what he did for Ida, and telling him, "I love you too." Like his greatest friend, Harald's last moments were with a smile on his face, being grateful and thanking those who helped him. Harald's tale is beautiful, in par with the great ones. A man surrounded by tragedy that was trying to make a difference in a world rotten to the very core. He had a simple dream: travel the world with the woman he loved. A dream that no matter how strong and powerful he was never able to fulfill. And that is what makes this story so great. One Piece is a shonen, a story for teenage boys, and for more that Oda has already said that he writes and draws his manga for everyone, it's undeniable that often things are solved by punch and sometimes kick, meaning that strength is a very relevant factor on how the story is written, usually said strength being the main factor on how the problems are solved. Usually goes like this: bad guy is doing bad guy stuff, the people that are suffering are too weak to defeat bad guy alone, so Luffy arrives, punches the bad guy, and then everyone is happy. Rinse and repeat almost every arc. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not criticizing shonen or Oda, because it would be disingenuous for me to say that the manga is just that, when in reality it's so much more, and because I too love punch. But it's refreshing to see a story when strength is not only a relevant factor, but actually go against sad characters' goal. This whole Harald backstory is shown to us that even Harald, being one of the most powerful characters we ever saw, rivaling even Rocks, that strength was detrimental for him. All he wanted was to live a peaceful life with Ida, but he couldn't. Because of his ancient giant blood, he was forced to marry another woman, the world government wanted to enslave him, and the people of other nations feared him and his people. And the worst part, he could do nothing about it. He, since birth, was jailed by his own strength. There was no bad guy to punch, no army to be conquered, no overwhelming force to be defeated. There's a reason why Rocks and Harald's story were presented in the same flashback. It's the same reason why Oda chose to create such a heavy bond between these two characters. It's because these two legendary figures shared the same goal and in the end were doomed because of it. They were trying to fight a world that would never let them be free.